What's up guys, my name is Manuel. Welcome to another episode of Bridge the Gap Tips. In today's episode we're going to be giving you some tips on how to create and put together images. I'm going to give you tips more focused on photographing people, kind of be it portraits or be a group of people outside. I personally have a few pieces that have been part of two galleries, one put together by Bridge the Gap Studios and another one kind of local youth one in London. So let's get right into the tips. The first tip is to do with controlling and knowing what components the exposure triangle has. So let's get right into that. At this point in the video, you might be asking yourself, what is the exposure triangle? Well, the exposure triangle is composed of three elements. The first element is shutter speed. Excuse my extremely bad handwriting, but shutter speed is the length of time the camera shutter is open to allow light into the lens. A slower shutter speed would mean more light goes into the lens, whereas a faster shutter speed means less light. This is usually measured in seconds or fractions of seconds. The second element for the exposure triangle would be the aperture or F, and in this case it is how big or small the size of the gap which allows light into the lens is. This might be counterintuitive, but when it comes to measuring it in F, a smaller number means a bigger hole which allows more light into the lens, while a bigger number would mean a smaller gap which allows less light into the lens. And last but definitely not least, the last component for the exposure triangle is actually the ISO. So ISO is how sensitive the camera is to light. So a higher ISO means it's more light sensitive, so the camera will pick up more light in darker situations or darker places, and a lower ISO is basically the opposite. All these are very interconnected, so changing one will affect the other, and in the end they all affect exposure. Exposure is basically how light or dark a picture is after it's captured. So always look out for that, guys. Always keep it in mind when you're shooting your pictures. One quick tip, so this will be a tip within a tip, call it tipception of the dome right there. But in DSLRs you can see there's a bar which shows how dark or light the frame actually is, so you could use it as reference in order to move perhaps your exposure. So you could use your shutter speed, you can slow it up, or you might want to move your aperture, make it bigger, up to you, but just keep that in mind. For the second tip, I'm going to give you guys kind of a more focused approach on each component of the exposure triangle, so my own parameters that I set for each component. So start with shutter speed. Shutter speed I don't think is kind of a big play when it comes to portraits or taking pictures of people. I think it's more, unless you're taking a long exposure picture, you won't really need to control it, unless it's for more of kind of, if you have too much light you might want to slow it down. If you have too little light you might want to increase it a little bit. But shutter speed, for example, for me plays more around aperture, which will come out next. But if you wanna kind of have a good lighting, just try to shoot sunrise or sunset. The golden hour gives you the best lighting when it comes to taking pictures. Second of all, we've got aperture. When taking a group of people, I would like you to focus kind of setting aperture at 5.6 or 8. That's because at medium range and with a group of people, so like 2 or more, it gives a good background blur while still keeping them in focus. So it's a good way to just have a nice, put together picture. For portraits, which is more like the close-up of only one subject, you can go as low as possible. For portraits, for example, you're gonna need a lot of the background to be completely blurred out. You don't want anything to distract the picture from this main subject. But aperture will probably be the most important component when it comes to shooting people. Finally, we got ISO. ISO is I think it's a weapon of last distraction, weapon of last resort. My bad. It's got more to do with if it's really dark. So if it's really dark, you might want to increase it, but I suggest you don't. simply because a high ISO can make your picture really grainy. You pick up a lot of noise and it's hard to edit that out on post-production. So try to keep your ISO around 200 or 500 ISO and you would take good pictures. But at the end of the day, guys, I think this way, so I don't think there's a right or wrong way to use each component. You can always change it to be, you know, as you like. At the end of the day, photography is just another art form to kind of communicate your creative mind, creative side. So just use it as you please. For the final tip, it's more to do with post-production, so editing. I think for the final tip, you guys should use the temperature and tint sliders in whatever software you use to edit to kind of change the mood of the picture. So you might want to make the picture, colder. So pop out the blue in the picture, make it more blue, make it somber. If you're trying to convey kind of a sad emotion, or you can, slide the temperature to be warmer, pop out the yellows in the picture, kind of make it look more joyful. It all depends on what emotions you're trying to, imply, or kind of what emotions you're trying to show the audience, basically, whoever's going to be looking at your picture. So temperature is a really key, component of what emotions you communicate to the customers or to the audience. So temperature slide is really important. Some pictures might look better black and white. You might want to choose to do that. And then there's also other components you might want to play with, like highlights, in case the picture is too bright, or like the lights are too bright, then the highlights bring them down. But most times, you don't really play into that. I think if you want to convey an emotion in mind, try to use a temperature slide. That's what I do a lot of times. For the last part of this video, I'd like to leave you guys with a challenge. So I would like for you to go out and take 3 pictures and edit them. How I told you, I'd like you to base them around the theme of freedom. I think with everything going on right now around the world, I think freedom is probably it would be a nice theme to center around, because I think it's something we can agree that everyone wants. But yeah, thank you for watching. That's all for Bridge the Gap Studios today. Guys, stay safe and be exceptional.